Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, as we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we are here to talk today about a very, I'm going to say for some, very difficult conversation to have, but it's one that we've had so many times on this program. It's dealing with the subject of death and dying. I have to tell you that in the year 2022, if 20 and 21 weren't challenging enough, 22 was pretty challenging because early in the year, I lost a dear friend who was like 94 years of age. He lived across the street from us. He and I, we would get together in my studio to transfer reel-to-reels and albums of Utah symphony music to digital. Then in February, I lost another dear friend who was a programmer on the station that I work for, and really unexpected, although I love the story they tell of him passing. He was at dinner, had a drink in one hand, supposedly a 50-cent piece, I think, or a silver dollar in his pocket. And there was some tradition there. I'm not sure what that is. And he was telling a story. And I don't know if he was finished with the story or not, but then he slumped over, but they were never able to revive him. Then in March, I lost my eldest sister. And so it's been a very interesting, to say the very least, just those 3 months alone, on top of other issues that are going on. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the loss of loved ones, friends, family, etc., with our very special guest today. He has put together, I think, a very interesting book. It's called Building Our Main Street. And my guest today is Kristian James. And before we roll in here, you're a 20-year U.S. Air Force veteran, served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and basically heard about other members of the military that died in service to their country and left small children behind. And I want to, first of all, thank you so much for being with us. And I heard it said, the best thing I can say to a service person is just thank you. Just thank you.
Thank you for having me, and I appreciate that. And just thank everybody that's ever served or is serving, because again, it can be a very difficult situation in places that we've been and places we're eventually going to go to.
Well, and you've also probably seen things, although in the Air Force you're flying high above, but nonetheless, I'm sure you're aware of what's going on the ground, and you've probably seen things that no human being should ever see, should ever be a part of, and yet, boom, there you were in two of these different places.
Yeah, so when initially, that's always the misconception with the Air Force is the funny thing is the Marines actually fly more than we do, but in 2006 when I was in Iraq, I worked in the prisons, so I was actually on the ground working in the prisons with the detainees. And 2 weeks in, we had a full-out riot. We had fireballs thrown at us. We had them burning down their caravans, and it was all over a misunderstanding. So, and then I've been mortared in both countries, and so it's one of those situations where I'm thankful to be here. But like you said, unfortunately, we've had service members lost and with little kids and families back home.
Yeah. I will tell you that one of the things that bothers me more than anything else about that loss, set aside any attitudinal perspectives towards the military, towards military life, towards the reason why you choose to serve, etc. What really bothers me more than anything else is the lost potential. Mm-hmm. What these individuals, men and women, might have contributed to our society and civilization, and we'll never know. Now, someone say, well, but they contributed because they were fighting for our freedoms, and on and on and on. It's like, no, you're missing the point. The point is, what if we had stopped this silliness of bickering and killing one another over, in some cases, territory? I mean, again, there's all kinds of reasons and so forth. And who knows, maybe this person might have come up with a cure to eradicate, who knows, the coronavirus or encephalitis or whatever the issues are, or come up with a new way of traveling from one part of the world to the other, not only in a sustainable manner, but in record time. I've been hearing about these rapid rail systems that could actually take you, if they were actually developed and built, from Los Angeles to New York in an hour. And so on and so on and so on. That's what saddens me. But not so much the conversation today about that lost potential, as much as the loss to those who are left behind, and especially kids. Have you found in your experience, since writing this book in particular, but maybe even prior, that is there a certain age break at which these young kids especially, they actually do understand that mom or dad or brother or sister, aunt or uncle, whoever it is, they're not coming home, and I'm so sorry, but you're not going to be seeing them again. And do they get it, or is it still, no, I'm going to sit. It's almost like, this as well as I do, I'm sure, of pets. I remember seeing, for example, when, who was it? George Sr., after his passing, and they showed that picture of his service dog laying there in front of his casket. I mean, that was just, that touches. How can that not touch you? But what about that perspective of kids? I mean, because usually kids out of the mouths of babes, as they say.
I agree. So when I was 11, I lost my grandfather, and I still remember not understanding it, because he was my first, lost family member. And I remember asking my dad, what happened. And he goes, oh, he was putting his plate away from having breakfast, and he just, fell and he was gone. And I said, okay, where'd he go? And heaven. I'm like, okay, what is, what's going, can you, and all he said was, just know he loved you. And then that was it. And he cut me off and moved on. And it made me really think for a very long time, okay, what is heaven? Because again, in stories, we hear different things, and then different religions don't necessarily call it heaven. They call it something else.
Mm-hmm.
And so my thing is I was at 11, I still couldn't really comprehend it.
Yeah.
So that's honestly the reason I wrote the book, was because my father unfortunately passed away in 2018, unsuspectingly. We unfortunately found him, and he had passed away. And my nephews, when we went to the house the next day, one of my nephews was just like, yeah, my dad pulled me aside and said, we need to talk about grandpa. And I just kept saying, please don't be dead. Please don't be dead. Please don't be dead. And I'm like, you don't really understand what that means.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when I decided to write this book, it was actually my now wife who gave me the idea, because we were leaving Disneyland, and her grandmother had just been in a retire, she had broken her leg, so she was at a care facility. And she goes, I really wish the care facilities was like Main Street, where they could go into different rooms and they would have different things to do. Like there's a movie theater, or there was this, or was this. And then I had the idea of, well, what if, because we always are told your life flashes before your eyes when you pass.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if it's Main Street? What if your life flashing before your eyes is legitimately your favorite places? Because I love Disneyland. When I moved here in California in 2008, the first thing I did was get an annual pass to Disney. And it wasn't so expensive. I don't have it now, because prices from 2008 to now went from $450 to $1,700 a year. And I'm like, okay. But I love Disneyland. It's something that I didn't really get to experience as a kid. I went once when I was 6. And then I went before I went to Iraq. And I joked with my mom. I'm like, oh, this is my good, this is my farewell. I get to go to Disneyland before I go. But that was the thing, is I was sitting here going, okay, so favorite memories. What if your favorite memories are built on a main street, and it's your favorite stores, places, memories of people, places you've been, places, that kind of thing. So that was kind of my way of trying to think of ways to help people understand, like kids understand, but also as a way to get family members and kids to talk to each other. Because I'd like for parents to be able to read this book to their kids, and then on the back there's white pages and be like, okay, what's on your main street? And it could be their favorite TV show or movie or place, and write down their age. And then, 5 years later, pull the book back out and go, okay, what's on your main street now? Because, kids change.
Yeah.
And it's a way to get to know your family, like to help your kids get to know you. Because that's one of the things I wish. My dad was very closed off. He was a military member as well and a fireman. And when he was around strangers, he'd be so open and talkative about his life and his career and things he saw. But when it came to family and when you'd ask him questions, he'd be like, oh, it's just stuff I did. So unfortunately, I don't know my dad's favorite song, movie, or anything, because he never really opened up to me or anyone that I really know of. So like I said, I don't want I'd like for other kids to not hopefully have that, where they're like, what was your dad's favorite movie? I don't know. All I know is he saw the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at a drive-in, and then and then he drove through Texas the next week and was terrified. That's really the only movie story I know of him.
My first wife and I sat and watched the first hour, maybe 45 minutes of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And eventually we finally turned it off, but it took us that long to get up and turn it off because we were mesmerized, astounded, awestruck.
Yep.
So I can relate from one level in terms of having seen the movie. But as you talk about what does your main street look like, my mind goes to growing up in Phoenix. Not only the street that I grew up on, which the Hubble Space Telescope was. I don't think it was named after. I think it was a guy by the name of Hubble. But I grew up on Hubble Street.
Okay.
And I still remember 16th Street and Thomas, the main intersection nearby. I used to travel. I used to deliver newspapers to the apartment complexes that I think are still there. And there was a gas station on the corner there. I believe there's now a Burger King, so it's still a gas station, but by a different form. And just remembering all of these different places as a kid growing up. Yeah, and thinking, okay, I wish I could go back there. I think, too, one of the other things that I think about, and I'm not sure, we'll talk a little bit about this, too, your philosophical or religious upbringing. I think I really want to find out from the Viking perspective, the Norse perspective, what does Valhalla look like, And then there's another place called Shambhala, and the list goes on of the different places that we hear about. That'd be kind of fascinating. We're talking with Kristian James and a book that he has written, and I think it would behoove you folks to get a copy of this, whether you've had people that you've lost. And I would be surprised if you haven't, but if you haven't, it's coming because that's life. Building Our Main Street is the title of the book. A website that you can go to, worldofchristianjames.com, worldofchristianjames.com. And the question is posed, what can parents say to counsel their young children when a close relative or friend dies? And we'll continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and Kristian James is my guest. I think this is a fascinating conversation because we're talking with a veteran of the Air Force, U.S. Air Force, and of course he was deployed, helping basically during the pandemic, and also you wondered how children were coping with the death of loved ones. I mean, that's the other thing. We're talking about this pandemic, and just in this country alone, we've lost over 1 million human beings. And I often wonder sometimes when I hear the unemployment or lack of workers reports, that, help wanted, and there's nobody that is taking the jobs. And I'm sitting there going, Yeah, we lost 1 million people. What do you expect? You're not going to have the same, you're not going to have the same employment base, or worker base that you had prior to the pandemic. In addition to all of the other reasons too. But let's talk a little bit about this book. And first of all, is it something that can be translated into an Audible, or is this something that you really need to have the pictures? And by the way, great illustrations as well.
Thank you. Mattia is actually the individual that did the artistry, and she's awesome. So I actually brought that up to my publisher because I like to read and that kind of thing, and he goes, "It really doesn't work without the pictures." He goes, "You can read it, but he goes, it doesn't work if it's not in front of you." And I said, "Okay." So that was that was kind of the end of it. And it's just because the pictures are so vibrant and beautiful, and it goes hand in hand. But at the beginning, when I first wrote the story and I gave it to my wife, like I sent it to her via text. Like I had the idea and I wrote it, and I didn't hear from her for 2 hours. So I was like, "Oh, it must not be very good." And finally I get a text back, and she was she was a teacher, now she's an assistant principal, and she goes, "I was giving a test and I read your book and I started to cry, so I had to excuse myself out of the classroom, and then I had to go show my other teacher friends, and then they started crying." I'm like, "Oh, so it's good?" She goes, "It's really good." She goes, "This is something that I think," and this was actually pre-pandemic. This was January of 2020, so it was a couple months before.
Yeah.
And then we ended up hiring Mattia off of a website called Upwork, where you can hire artists. And I highly suggest it if you need anything illustrated. Go on there and look for an artist because they're amazing. There's so many people that are looking for, like you were talking about, jobs and commissioning work and stuff like that. And she was just amazing and did a great job. And yeah, we ended up finally getting it done last year, and then my publisher picked it up shortly thereafter. After he read my other book, All Hallows Eve in Salem, he picked that one up first, and then he picked up Main Street, and it got released. So it was about a 2 year turnaround, 2.5 years.
Well, I'll tell you what. I think that with technology the way it is today,
Mm-hmm.
you could create the hard copy, and then as you turn each of the pages, I mean, because we know there are greeting cards that when you open them up, they talk to you or they sing or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting here thinking, you could do the same thing. It would be a little bit more, maybe a little pricier, but the book could be read to you as you're going through it. You know what I'm saying? As you open each one, almost like a pop-up. Instead of a pop-up, though, the voice pops up, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
and then reads it to you. Although I will also say that I think that it would be better if a loved one, a parent, a sibling, etc., were to read it to the young kids. Then
Mm-hmm.
there's a much more personal situation in that regard. And I think that's very, very important, don't you?
I do, and it's another thing, as they're reading it, they can interject their own experiences or places, or that kind of thing. Because I would hope the little one would be like, "Oh, there's this, like, there's a pizza place. There's a pizza place in the book. Like, you take me." Like, yes, and that's something that would be on my main street. Or because you talked about growing up in Phoenix, I grew up in Gilbert. So I one of the things that I love going to is we had at one point we had a big open lot. They built an Albertsons, and then they would have the carnival there every year. But then they put a Blockbuster there. So we used to go to Blockbuster all the time, which was great. But then now Blockbuster closed, and now it's like it's like a loan lending place. And I'm like, that's lame. I don't, so every time I drive by it, I think of the carnival I went to with my mom and my brother, and then the Blockbuster.
Mm-hmm.
And those are things that I can interject with my daughter Abigail, as I'm reading this book to her, and be like, "Oh yeah, my favorite memories were going to Blockbuster on on Tuesdays and hoping the movie was still there, because you had the slip cover, and
Yeah.
if there was nothing behind it, that meant it was gone, and you're just felt dejected because you're like, well, what do I get now?
Better have a second choice somewhere.
Right. So I told, it's not like streaming now where you could just, it's always there.
Yeah.
With that, the Goldbergs, there's a show called The Goldbergs that hit it perfectly, where the kid goes in, he goes, it's not here. Okay, maybe the return bin has it. So they start going through the return bin, and if you find it, you feel like you just like won the Stanley Cup, because you're like, I found it. And then you had to ask the Blockbuster employee that was probably a teenager that didn't like any of us kids, be like, can you scan this in for me so I can have it, please? Like, these are little stories that, you can go off onto I call it a side adventure, right? And tell stories of like your childhood and things to your little one, so they understand you, because kids don't think their parents understand a lot of the things they do and the way they are. But we went through the exact same things. It was just, my time was pre-internet, pre-streaming, like, all that, pre-Amazon. So you had to hope the toy store had your toy, because if not, you're in Gilbert, Arizona.
There you go. Well, I have a story of when I would be bicycling around, and that's how we got around all over the place. We were everywhere on our 20-inch bicycles. For a while, I had a 20-inch bike with a banana seat and one of those real tall, they called them, I never understood why, they called them sissy bars. Okay, but it was a real tall one. And, and I used to be able to lean back, and just pedal away. And then, of course, I started delivering newspapers, so I went to a bigger bicycle, that had baskets on it and the paper bags on it and all that kind of stuff. But there was this one store there at 16th Street in Thomas. It was on the northeast corner. Now, the corner store was a Circle K, where I would get my 64-ounce drink cup. And I built a cup holder on my bicycle for this. All right. But down the strip mall, about 3 doors down, at the end of the strip mall on Thomas Road, was this hobby shop. And I loved building models. Oh, my God. And it was John Fiore's Hobby Haven.
Okay.
And I would spend a lot of time in there. He would give me deals on certain models, because he knew that, even though I was a paper boy and didn't have a whole bunch of money, but I have to say the one that I loved building was the B-52 bomber that he helped me to, and I would make payments on the thing, and all that kind of stuff. It was a great time. I'll never forget that relationship I had as a kid growing up with him. So yeah, each one of us has our own beautiful stories that we can incorporate as we're sharing the book that we are talking about here today, Build Our Main Street. Here's a quote actually from the book. Even when someone leaves us to go visit their Main Street, you will never stop missing them. The greatest aspect of Main Street is it is filled with memories of those we love. And until then, we can visit them anytime by closing our eyes and remembering them, as we do here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and Kristian James is my guest. We're talking about Build Our Main Street, dealing with the loss of loved ones, whether it be a child or whether it be a young person, 20s, 30s, it doesn't matter. This book is for, I think, for anyone. And what I love is the story you told, Kristian, of a principal who had to leave the room during administering a test because she started crying. Did she ever share with you the reason why it touched her so? I mean, did she share with you the loss of the person that she remembered as she was reading that book?
So, the principal now is my wife. So, she just told me, she goes, it's so sweet. It's so emotional. And again, because we had discussed it a month prior when we were leaving Disney. And, at the time, she lived with her grandmother. And when we got married, we had her grandmother move in with us, and we took care of her until she passed away last July.
Mhm.
And she just said, it made her think of all the great times she had with her grandmother, even though, because her grandmother at the time, like she had she kind of went downhill to where pretty much she would just get up, she would be in bed most of the day besides using the bathroom and eating. And so it made her think about all the great times, like her grandmother and her riding the bus to go to different places and, just being there for her. And she just said, she goes, this is such a beautiful story. And it was just one of those, wow, okay. I think, because I've been writing a long time, but it's always been like little things, little short stories, that kind of thing. And she looked at me and she goes, I think you found your niche, which was kids books. And the other, you were talking about pets earlier. I actually wrote, and this will come out next summer. It's called Building Our Rainbow Bridge. Oh. And it's for those that have lost their little pets, and their pets can have fur, they can have scales, they can have whatever, right? But I base it off of my French Bulldog Cubby, who I ended up having to put down in June of 2019. And she was my sidekick. When I moved out here in 2008, I got her. And that's the one thing, like when it comes to the Building Our series, because I have a few more that I've written, I want it to be teachable moments for parents and kids alike, because I want them to understand that it's okay to talk about your emotions and your feelings. Because again, like my dad was very like, like I don't show emotion. And even when, we had to put down our favorite, our German Shepherd, which was he loved that dog. Like it was absolutely his dog. He loved her. He still didn't really show emotion, but I could tell he was hurt. And I want people to understand that you don't have to act tough. Like you lost a loved one, like pets are family. And it's okay to talk about it and cry and show your emotions.
Well, now, that's a very interesting perspective coming from a U.S. Air Force veteran like yourself. You're right. Man up, buddy. Come on now. Boy, big boys don't cry. And, all that kind of stuff. And especially the Marines. Oh, my Lord.
They cry too. They just do it in buildings.
Now, here's something. I got a question for you in this regard.
Sure.
We have various agencies within our own government. Mm-hmm. They go out and they're agents, for example, and they go out and they do their job, whatever it is they're asked to do. And when they come back, and this even applies, I think, even in our law enforcement, when they come back and if they've completed their task, they are debriefed. All right? Mm-hmm. They spend some time talking to somebody about what happened.
Correct.
Does that happen in the military? Has it ever happened to where we could then get a better handle on what you went through so that we can actually help you to, I don't want to say reacclimate to civilian life, but at least so that you can put into a better perspective what you went through and maybe even release some of that energy that you've been, so to speak, storing up because of those activities that you've been involved in. I'll put it that way. Sure. Rather than, okay, you're no longer in harm's way, go on your way. Because one of the things that I think that needs to be put on the poster for recruitment is, yes, we want you to serve, blah, 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 blah. And then down at the bottom, and by the way, when you come back, you get no help from us. Because that seems to be the case. And it's really sad because other cultures through history, and you may be familiar, win or lose, certain tribes, for example, win or lose, the men who would come back after fighting and defending their tribe and so forth, they were honored for their willingness to do that. And we, maybe on Memorial Day, maybe on Veterans Day, and some of the other Flag Day and those kinds of things, maybe we show a little honor and respect. But what about the rest of the year? I mean, as I said before, you've seen things, and people in the military who should just never see.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I'll have two stories for you. then this the differences between the last 16 years.
Okay.
So in 2007, when I got home from Iraq, like I said, I had fireballs thrown at me. I was mortared, that kind of thing. And when I got home, I didn't have any mental health checkups. Like my mental health checkup was legitimately me getting home to Phoenix, Arizona at Sky Harbor. 2 days later, jumping on a plane and going to Chicago to spend a month with my grandparents, where nobody could bother me. I would get my grandparents owned a home in Lincoln Park. It's a mile and a half from Wrigley Field. It's a mile and a half from the city. And I would just get on the bus, listen to music, and go back and forth. And that was my therapy. That was my way of decompressing. Now, if I would have came home in 2007 and I had a wife and kids, and I wouldn't have been able to get away or decompress, and I would have been, because I think that's one of the issues, right? Is these military members are brought back home and they're thrown back into a lifestyle where, things need to be fixed. This needs to be happening. They're not getting that chance to relax and decompress.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right.
Because that's the other thing too, is in 2007, I was 20, I was going to be 23. Now, if you would have sat me down and had a therapist talk to me at the point when I first got home, I'm still processing it all. So I probably would have thought that everything was fine. I did end up going to a therapist a few months later just to make sure I was okay. Now, fast forward with the job I did from 2008 to 2018, where I worked with the unmanned aircraft and those flew overseas. I saw a lot of things, but again, I put in my mindset of this is a job, this is my mission, this is what we got to do. And then when COVID happened, I got activated as the officer in charge at the Riverside County Coroner's Office. And then this past year, I got activated in January to work at the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office. Now, the big difference is after these missions to the coroner's office and everything like that, I've had behavioral health and mental health has contacted me quite a bit because they wanted to make sure we were okay and actually checking on us and talking to us. Because it's a very different experience walking into a coroner's office when you've never done that before. And it's the sights, it's the smells, it's just everything. And like, I would tell my leadership, like, yeah, I'm okay, but it's a lot. My leadership checked on me all the time. I checked on my team all the time. And then after the mission, I had to go talk to a behavioral health specialist, therapist. And then recently I just went to the VA because I've been in 20 years. I'm still in the Guard, but over the years, my back has been bothering me and everything like that. So I listed everything. And I'm not going to lie to you, I was really surprised with how quick they got back to me because I did the report on July 1st. I had appointments to the VA for mental health and for physical examinations 2 weeks later. So it has gotten a lot better. Plus, the Senate just passed that new bill that's going to help people with burn pits. I have chronic rhinitis, and I think it's one of the reasons that I unfortunately got medically disqualified to be a pilot, because whenever I go fly and I land, it feels like I have the flu for about 24 to 48 hours. When I was in Iraq, we had burn pits that I saw every day when I was in my towers burning. The smoke would come towards us. I put my gas mask on to protect myself from the giant smoke plumes coming, but you're always breathing it. And I never had those issues till years later. So I think that's that would be a benefit of a lot of members is when you first get back, you don't want to admit anything's wrong. You want to be like, no, I'm strong. I got through it, But a lot of it is when military members get out of service or they're able to decompress and think about the things they saw, things they did, that's when they need the help. And I think that's what needs to be expanded upon, because if you get out in 2006 and you saw your buddy get hit by an IED or saw your friends, unfortunately lose their lives, it may not mentally hit you at first because you're still in a state of shock and you're trying to, protect yourself. So you're like, I don't want to pretend like any of this is bothering me. But 3 or 4 years down the line, after you've gotten out and you're actually now starting to let yourself process it and think about it, that's when a lot of the issues can arise. And I think that's where the military and veterans affairs, mental health really needs to come into play. Because that's one of the hardest parts is they want proof. They want all this, validation. And they're like, where were you? When were you? And, you need to give proof of this and proof of this. And I'm like, well, I can tell you what happened there, but I can't give you the exact date, time, of what happened. So I think that's one of the biggest things is at the end of the day, when you're going to get your disability to help you out after everything you've done, it still comes down to lawyers, because the lawyers are the ones that are going to do it. They're the ones that, I was talking to my wife about the calculation for disability. It's ridiculous. If you have mental health and they give you a 70% disability rating, there's 30% left, right? They'll say 30% of you is healthy. Now, if you claim your knees, your back, and all that stuff, and they give you 10%, so it's not 80% now. They take 10% of your healthy, so that's 3. So now you have 73% disability. And I'm like, who came up with this algorithm and this calculation? You could legitimately have over 200% disability rating from different parts of your body, and you'll be at 97%, which they'll round up to 100. And they can come back and look at it years later. And if you go down to 94, you lose your 100%, you go down to 94%, down to 90%, because they round down or round up. So wow. This has been my tangent the last couple of months when I've actually started digging into it, because as an officer now in the Air Force, I was enlisted for 17 years. My goal is to help my troops, especially when they need help. And I got into law school. I just haven't wanted to pay for it. So I do all the research for my friends and everything. I'm a lawyer. I just don't have the JD, because I don't want to pay $50,000 and be in debt to go to school yet. I'd rather, I'm still trying to find scholarships and all this stuff to help cover it. Because, I'm lucky. I've never had student loan debt, and it's because of my GI Bill.
Yeah, I was just curious. I always thought that the GI Bill took care of education, but apparently not.
It runs out.
It runs out, sure. We're talking with Kristian James, and we're talking about Build Our Main Street. That's the title of the book for, I'll put it this way, children of all ages, ladies and gentlemen, dealing with the subject that we've been talking about here on the program. A lot of ancillary subjects as well that are extremely important as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it's a pleasure to have Kristian James with us here on the program. You have kids at this point?
I do. We just had a little girl 7 weeks ago. So she's officially 7 weeks old today. Her name is Abigail Salem.
Well, congratulations to you and your wife on that new addition. And obviously, there's going to come a day when you're going to be reading this book to your little girl, and because maybe a grandparent, a close family friend, an aunt or an uncle, especially if there's a crazy uncle in the family. I think I'm that crazy uncle. I'm actually a great uncle. I have no kids of my own, but I certainly do enjoy my nieces and nephews of my sisters, and yet at the same time, I know too. I remember back in March, the 29th. When I got the phone call from my youngest sister. And I thought for sure when she said, I've got some bad news, it was about my dad. My dad, 90 years old last year. And I'm thinking, oh, this is the call. And then it turns out, of course, it was my eldest sister. And it was a shock at first, but we were all aware that she wasn't doing well. But I did not know that she wasn't doing that well. But at the same time, I was lucky enough in January to have had this phone conversation with her. And of course, found out at her memorial that she never shied away from the hard questions. And I said, are you ready? And she said, she said, yes and no. What? What do you mean, yes and no? She says, well, no, because of my husband, her husband, Perry. because she's worried about him and what he's going through, what he'll go through.
Yeah.
She says, from a personal, spiritual perspective, she says, yeah, I'm ready. I'm at peace with it. And this is what many of the people at the memorial would say when they would talk to her. She's, yeah. And I also found out, too, with all of the health issues she dealt with throughout her entire 65 years, I think it was 64, they said she was never bitter. Never bitter. And I thought, wow, if only we could all go through our lives not being bitter about the hand we've been dealt and so forth. And then, of course, they would talk about how wonderful she was and her smile and her laugh. And I started hearing her voice almost that day that I got the call saying, Richard, hey, Richard, everything's okay. Everything's okay. Talk to us a little bit about your personal experiences with loss. I'm sure that in addition to maybe some of your own men, who, by the way, this is one of the aspects of the military I absolutely love. I wish we could incorporate it more into our civilian life. And that is the brotherhood. And actually, it goes beyond that, the familyhood, if you will. You guys and gals have each other's six, okay? And it goes beyond not leaving any person behind, any man or woman behind. You guys are there for each other. And that to me is that I wish we could incorporate and put into an injection that we could give to everybody because we sure need that these days. But talk to us a little bit about your own personal experiences with the losses in your life.
Sure. So I've been blessed when it comes to having not lost any of my team members deployed. Of course, there's teams that aren't, didn't have that same luck. I've had friends that have lost military members, their friends, and they wear the bracelets and that kind of thing. And the thing I would always tell them is, if you ever need to talk, let me know. And it's the same thing with my team members that I was deployed with. I may not have seen some of these guys for 16 years, but I reach out to them on Facebook once in a while, and we can just BS about the things we saw, experienced, the funny stories that we had there. But when it comes to loss, like I said, I lost my grandfather when I was 11. I've lost all my grandparents, but the one that was surprising, because again, they were in their 90s, right? Was my dad. So I talked to my dad that Thursday, and I was driving down to Phoenix because my mom and I were going to go to the Cubs game on Saturday, and then I was going to take my dad and my nephews to the Cubs game on Sunday. And I get in on Friday, and I text my dad to let him know I made it, and I don't hear from him, which isn't weird. It was like 8:00 at night. He would go to bed early because he was retired, but he was always still working. He was a workaholic, and he wanted to be a therapist. So Saturday, I take my mom to the Cubs game. It's opening day at spring training. I have the baseball, so it's kind of one of those sad moments because I have a baseball with the date that we found him. Mm-hmm. And I met Brian Urlacher, the middle linebacker of the Chicago Bears, my all-time favorite football player. And I texted him the picture, and I was like, look who I met. No response. Again, not unusual. He works a lot, and he doesn't have his phone on him. Get home, my brother Steve messages me and goes, hey, have you heard from Dad? And I went, no. So I messaged my Uncle Don, and I messaged him. I was like, hey, because they were always together. It's like, have you heard from Dad? And I see that on the message it says read, but there's no reply. So I go downstairs. My mom's having like a little get together party, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna go to Circle K on Lindsay and Warner. And she goes, okay. Because I wasn't gonna say I haven't heard from Dad. They're divorced, but they she still cared.
Right.
So I drive to his condo, and when I get to his condo, I turn the corner, and there's a fire truck and an ambulance. And I went, oh, okay. And get out of my car, walk up. My brother Steve is crying, grabs me, and he says, Dad's gone. And I went straight into mode of, okay, we got to start telling the family, right? And I was like, have you called anyone? He's like, no. I'm like, okay, I'm going to call my Uncle Bill, who was a retired homicide detective in Tucson. And so I call Uncle Bill. I'm like, hey, Bill, are you sitting down? He goes, yeah. I'm like, we found Dad. He passed away. We don't know what happened. Come to find out, he had a rare heart virus. Like he had the flu, and then I guess the rare heart virus took him like either at night on Thursday night after I talked to him, or Friday morning. And then I called my brother Sean, and then I called my mom, and I was like, "Mom, are you sitting down?" She goes, "Why?" I'm like, "Just sit down." And I told her, and she started like screaming, and I'm like, "Okay." And everybody later is like, "How did you handle these calls? Like, you were calm, you were cool, you were collected." I'm like, it had to be done, and it's not good for me to be hysterical, crying. And I told people later, I'm like, I didn't even cry when he passed away. I'm like, well, why not? I'm like, my dad was 63, and I know you're talking about your sister not being bitter. My dad was very bitter with a lot of the things that went wrong in his life, and he would always joke and say, like, I'd be like, "Happy birthday," he'd be like, "I'm just a year older." I think of birthdays as a blessing. He did not. So I told people at his funeral, because he always joked, he always said, like, "I don't think anybody likes me." I'm like, "Dad, people love you. Like, you've helped so many people out." And when I stood up on stage, it was packed. Like, it was a big church, and it was packed. And the first words I said was, and he said people didn't like him, and I just told people, I'm like, I know he wanted to be here longer for his grandkids, but I think he's happy where he is. So I'd say to me, that's my biggest loss, because again, I'm lucky. I got to tell him on Thursday, "I love you and I'll see you soon." And he said, "I love you back." Come to find out, he was having a sibling spat. And so some of his siblings were like, the last conversation I had was a fight with them. I'm like, yeah, but he had a fight with everyone. Like, that was him. Like, I think I had a fight with him the week before. So I was like, trust me, he's not holding it as a grudge. You shouldn't either.
Yeah.
But again, like, his passing and my nephew's reaction and the way that they acted is what, was the breadcrumbs to me writing Building Our Main Street, because I wanted to write something for them to help explain.
Yeah. I love the fact, and I can say the same as you, that with my eldest sister, there was nothing unsaid. Absolutely nothing unsaid. I even told her before we ended our conversation in January. I told her I loved her, and I know that the days are coming when I'm going to get the phone call, assuming that I am hopefully one of the last few standing. I'm
Right,
gonna
the
get this phone
survivor.
call. Yeah, exactly. About my mother, my father. I was born into a family that came to be 8 strong. 2 parents and 6, 2 older sisters, 2 younger sisters, and a younger brother.
Mm.
And so it's like, okay, I'm here, and this is life. And I've had a number of pets, both that were mine, but also that were my second wife's, and also some other animals that we brought together into the family who have since passed. I think the most emotional that I got was over my dear, sweet Makushla. She's a beautiful white shepherd. We think shepherd husky mix, but she was all white. And the one thing I can remember about her is that even after the x-rays were taken of her hips, that did not look good at all. And for 14 months, we had to help her in and out, and the diapers and all of that kind of stuff. She would be out in the backyard when she was still able to walk. She would go out into the backyard, roll over on her back, and start flailing her paws, her legs, all 4 of them around, as she would writhe around on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I told the vet this, and she says, well, apparently she hasn't seen her x-rays because she's not supposed to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But she would get muddy when it would rain. She would get real muddy. Mm-hmm. And within a couple of hours after, she would shake it off, and no mud on her fur was such, it just didn't hold on. So she was always this pristine white, so beautiful and so loving. She was a caregiver to the very end. I think one of the struggles that I have with the way that we treat humans versus animals. We seem to show greater respect and love for the animal when it's time for them to go than we do humans. The medical community, I use this phrase, does not know when to say when. And I realize this raises all kinds of issues for people about euthanasia and so on and so forth. But for example, we went 14 months with my Makushla before she finally let us know, okay, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, it's time.
It's time. And it wasn't until I went into a therapy session that I broke down because I felt so badly that we had waited so long and that maybe she was suffering and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But I was told by some of my other guests to connect with the spirits of animals who have passed that I did just fine. And now she's with me always, sort of over my right shoulder, guiding me along. She's there with me, walking along beside me. And so that's kind of cool. Do you think that this is a book that is going to help also with not just family members or humans, but again, as you say, you've got another building that you've got coming out dealing with the rainbow, building our, what is it? Building our rainbow bridge?
Yep. So
that'd be great.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the thing too, right? Is as you're looking at your main street, I'm sure your pets and your furry friends, if you have snakes or spiders or whatever you grow up loving, they're a part of your memories too. So why wouldn't, they be there?
Yeah.
And like, I've always, like you said, right, your dog is always with you. And I feel the same way. At the end of my Building Our Rainbow Bridge book, I state that Cubby runs, through her own little main street that she had. And at the end, it's Grandpa. Grandpa's waiting for her at the end of, the Rainbow Bridge. And I pictured it as my dad. My dog Cubby loved my dad. Like they would play together. He would pat her butt really hard, and she'd take that as, okay, it's time to play. So she'd jump off the couch and go get a toy, and then they'd fight each other, and then he'd like roll her over and pat her butt hard again. And so that's what I pictured. I pictured that, like I said, when my dad passed, I didn't cry but it's because it wasn't my choice, right? With Cubby, I had to put her down. Like the week before Father's Day, she woke up and she had, her eyes were like going back and forth, like wobbling. Come to find out, she had an inner ear issue, and she got better for Father's Day. So for Father's Day, I had her back to normal for 24 hours. Like I played with her. She was a French bulldog, and she had a normal sized football that she would bite the laces of and carry with her. So that's what we played with. And then near the end of that day, she like rolled herself into my lap and just looked up at me, and I held her. And then the next day I woke up and she was back to eyes being out, and rushed her to the vet. They're like, oh, we fixed her. So I went and got her, and she like planted her paws on the ground and was looking down, and it wasn't her. And Thursday night, I took her home one last night, and she shook the whole night. Friday morning, I took her to the vet, and I made the decision to put her down.
Yeah.
And I bawled like I was, because again, to me, she's not just an animal. She's legitimately was my child.
Yeah.
Like, she was with me I raised her from 4 weeks, up until she lasted to be 11. And so my main street's going to be loaded with Cubby. Like that's, and then her sister Wrigley, who's now 14, she's a Min Pin Dachshund. She's so full of life and happy. And we took her to the vet, and they were talking about, one side of her mouth needs like dental surgery, but we're going to have to put her to sleep to do it. And I'm like, she's 14. She's not in any pain. I don't see her in any pain. And I worked in a vet office when I was a kid because I wanted to be a veterinarian, until I saw a big, bald, 6'6" biker walk in with his German Shepherd and have to put that, his best friend down. And I just started he was bawling his eyes out, and I was like, I cannot do this. Like, this is not, I know it's humane and it's the best way to go, but this is not something I could do.
Yeah.
But they always said, if a dog is over a certain age, do not put the dog to sleep to clean its teeth, because more than likely it's not going to wake up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I told my wife, I'm like, I do not feel comfortable doing that. She's not in any pain. I don't see her whining. Like, let's just be honest. My dog, if she hurts her back leg, even a slightest twinge, will limp and whine and complain. Like, and then she'll, like, 2 weeks, a day later, she'll still do it. I'm like, stop faking. And then all of a sudden her leg's fine. She stops faking. Like, she knows. So I told her, I was like, I don't feel comfortable. She's fine. She's eating fine. She's still eating, hard foods. And I was like, I think the vet's just trying to get money, personally.
Yeah.
And I just, so yeah, like I said, Cubby and Wrigley's going to be on my main street.
Yeah.
100%. And that's the thing too, is you can openly talk about your pets on Main Street. And then Rainbow Bridge next year, again, it's just a book that I hopefully will help kids deal with the loss, and also understand it's okay to adopt another pet, because I know a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to get another one, because then it's like I'm replacing that, them. And I'm like, you're not replacing them. You're giving another animal a forever home that wouldn't otherwise have one.
Yeah. Well, I know that that it's never easy. One of the things that we have learned, though, it took a while for us to kind of get the message on this one, but I strongly advocate that if you do know that it's time, and I like to use the phrase, when it's time to let them go, that if you can, do it in your home. Because, first of all, they're comfortable. They're in a familiar place. And if you have kids and if you have other animals, I will tell you that with Makushla, when we finally made the decision, we came home, and this is interesting. When we came home, as we get out of the truck, we look up and a hawk is flying over our cottage where we live. Rather, for us, rather auspicious. When the vet finally did arrive, and they administered the first medication, if you will, they left us alone for a few minutes to say our goodbyes. And we have 4 cats right now. Now, at one point we had, I want to say 9. And of course, we've had them pass on. And one of the cats came over, nuzzled with Makushla, and then laid down right next to her for a short time. Another one of the cats came over and nuzzled her a little bit. Basically, the cats would come by, not all of them, but most of them, and showed her that respect, if you will, saying, "Hey, we know you're leaving. We just wanted to come over here and say we'll see you on the other side," kind of thing. Then the vet came back in and administered the second medication, if you will. And then she was finally gone. And I am the kind of guy who, at the time, I didn't get that emotional, but I also knew that I wanted to lay her to rest right away. And I found this giant piece of blue material, almost a silk. I literally had to bring a wheelbarrow in the house. That's how big she was. And of course, it was so close to the time of her passing that her whole body was just limp.
Yeah.
So I lifted her and I put her in the wheelbarrow, and I gracefully put the blue over her, the corners, wheeled her out to the spot where I had prepared for her, and I laid her to rest, and we covered it up, and then I put some rocks over the top to keep critters from bothering her, which they did not bother her.
Good.
And said a few words, and it was, as I said, it wasn't until a therapy session that I was in where I really let loose, in terms of missing her and wishing that I'd let her go sooner and so forth. And I've come to realize that, we let her go when it was time to let her go. All right. And there's no need for guilt. I think your book is going to be quite profound for a lot of folks. Building our Rainbow Bridge when that is released. We want to encourage people to get a copy of Building Our Main Street. Kristian James, along with his wife Jessica, have put this together, and I say with your wife because obviously she really kind of lit the fire under you, so to speak. Building Our Main Street. It is a book for all ages. It's a way for families to talk about their fondest memories and what could be on their own personal Main Street. And instead of the end, it paves the way for the beginning of a new adventure. And the adventure continues here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and Kristian James is my guest, author of Building Our Main Street, and soon to come, I guess sometime in 2023, Building Our Rainbow Bridge, regarding the loss of our furry and feathered friends, as well as scaly friends as well. We used to have a blue-tongued skank. Literally, the tongue of this blue-tongued skank was blue. I called him a snake with legs, because that's kind of what it was like. He would slither out of just about any situation. I want to ask you, before we wrap things up here, Kristian, sure, about your personal philosophy, what you were raised with, and where you are today, maybe even in light of what we've been talking about throughout this past hour.
Sure. So growing up, my dad would try to get us to go to Lutheran churches and that kind of thing, but I wasn't really into it. When I got into high school is actually when I started going to church with my friends, and it was a non-denominational Christian church. I got baptized in August of 2002. And ever since then, I used to help with the junior high kids, the high school kids, and that kind of thing. And then now currently, my wife and I, living in California, we went to a few churches. We still just haven't found our church home yet. But I'm a believer in heaven. I'm a believer in, that's where, when I pass on, where I'm going to go, and I'll go through my Main Street. My dad will be there. My grandparents will be there, and we'll be reunited, for the first time in, however many decades it is, once I do meet there. But that was the one thing too, right, with writing this book, is I don't mention heaven. I don't mention that kind of thing, because I wanted to be very open to different people's religions. Or if you're not a believer, if you're an atheist, that's fine. Like, I just want you to have a book to be able to read to your kids and to help better understand. Again, to me, I've always been told your life flashes before your eyes. So that's my Main Street. That's part of your life. Because I know that was like one of the biggest things that I've heard from people that have read the book that don't have any religious beliefs or background is, thank you for writing a book that I can read to my kids to help understand what happens after we go away. And if, we don't believe this and don't believe this. Mm. And I said, well, that's what I wanted. I wanted to create something where everybody feels included. And you're not sitting there, because again, I think everybody has a topic that if you read something about it, especially politics right now, right? If you're reading something and all of a sudden a name pops up, it could be Biden, it could be Trump, it could be Pelosi, it could be DeSantis. You're just sitting there, and as soon as you see that name, you go, ugh, and you close the article or whatever. Yeah. I know some people are that way when it comes to religious stuff like that. And I didn't want to put my own personal beliefs into something. I wanted it to be open for everyone to place their own beliefs. Because again, at the end of the Main Street, you can add whatever you'd like to add to where you and your belief system is going to take you. Mm.
Well, I applaud you for the work that you have done on this particular book, Build Our Main Street, and also for the coming Build Our series, continuing, of course, with Build Our Rainbow Bridge, and I'm sure there will be others to follow. And I really do appreciate the time that you have given us here on the program to talk about these things. I think it's not only a lot of fun from my perspective, okay, because this subject has always been near and dear to my heart. I've always been curious as to what a person is experiencing, like my sister. What was it like to leave the body, And
Hmm.
what's she experiencing now? What is she doing? And those kinds of things. But at the same time, I'm curious from your perspective. At the same time, I, like my sister, I'm at peace. If today's my day, which I hope it isn't, but if it is, I'm good to go. Okay. Is there more that I want to do? Oh, absolutely. I have to outlive my great grandmother who lived to be 100. I'm 62. Okay. I've got another lifetime that I want to live yet. So, but if it's today, hey, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, same. Like, I'd like to be here for my daughter because, again, she's 7 weeks old. But in 38 years, I've lived a lot, I've done a lot, I've experienced a lot, I've traveled a lot. Um, if today was my day, I hope that I was able to leave something great for my daughter. And I always joke, I'm a big collector of like um, the old Ninja Turtles and like horror
Hmm.
memorabilia, and I have a bunch of stuff signed, and like I have a Lon Chaney Jr. Thing signed by him. Like I told my wife, like, if it's my time to go, I think she'll be taken care of because she's going to be able to sell this stuff, you know, for a great amount of money. Uh, so that's the one thing we always joke about is, well, if you go, you left Abigail with a nice nest egg for later. She decides needs money to go to college or anything like that.
There
So
you go. There you go. A little
yeah,
planning ahead of sorts. Yeah,
correct.
I hear you. I have no kids to pass anything on to, but I do have a lot of audio equipment that goes back to the 80s. So I've got a lot of antiques, I guess you might say. So
Yeah, it's like 80s are antiques. I'm like, I'm an antique now then.
I know. I was thinking the same thing. I was born in 1960, so I'm not sure. I'd like to consider myself classic. Okay.
Yeah, like a fine wine, you're just aging gracefully.
There it is right there. This is Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you so much for joining us here on the program, along with Kristian James, author of I've already forgotten it, Build Our Main Street. Main Street, yes, kind of like in Disneyland, as you were talking before. I have to say that here in Santa Barbara, where I live now, we do have what's called a Main Street. It's called State Street.
Mhm.
I don't think that Phoenix actually, I mean, yeah, okay, Central Avenue. When I was a kid growing up, we could refer to that, I suppose, as a main street. But I guess it really depends upon where you were living in Phoenix. It was such a large city, even as a kid growing up. But I have to tell you, my friend, that I could never move back there. As much as I love my parents and my sisters and brother, my brother lives here in California as well, but everybody else is there in Arizona, in Phoenix metropolitan area. I couldn't go back primarily because of the heat, but primarily because of the way that it has changed to the extent that I don't even recognize it anymore. And even when we went back there in 2019 for Christmas, and then of course I went back in 2021. It just doesn't have the same feel. And I know that places need to grow and change and evolve and so forth. But boy, I tell you what, the memories that I have of running around the neighborhoods without fear, without concern, with the other neighborhood kids, and just having a blast, not a care in the world for the most part.
Yep.
I miss that. I really do. But at the same time, I know that there are greater things are coming. And I believe that we're not done yet. And we're not done yet with this particular program, Build Our Main Street. That is the book we're talking about. Website, ladies and gentlemen, that you want to go to, worldofchristianjames.com. We've kind of been visiting that world here today, Kristian, and we thank you so much for letting us.
I appreciate you having me. And if you get a book off the website, I'll sign and personalize it to you. And you can also get it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and places like that as well. But with me, it's the same price and it's signed to you and your family.
Very, very cool. Well, folks, go to his website, worldofchristianjames.com. And Kristian, we're going to be linked to that website so people can go straight there and find out more about you and the work you're doing. And of course, anticipate the release of the next work, Build Our Rainbow Bridge, and whatever else comes out of that series as well. Before we let you go, we like to ask 3 final questions By the way, I always find it fascinating when I say that I certainly suddenly become plural. We have three questions we would like to ask you. Who else is here?
You and your audience.
Me and my audience. Yes, the audience would like to ask these questions.
Yes.
Before I do, though, I want to address the audience and thank you for listening to Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world as we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We're here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays for our special edition of Tell Me Your Story that we are streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. The podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, many other locations on the internet. And we have a YouTube channel where you can watch these interviews, subscribe. We're up to 80 subscribers. I know more people than that are listening and watching these interviews, but I thank those people who are subscribing. You know, you get notified if you subscribe to the podcast or videocast. You get notified when a new program or new interview is posted, and that to me is the main reason why. I'm not that concerned with 80 or 800 subscribers. I just want to get this information out so that you can start really thriving in your life, and that's what we're all about. We also ask that you participate in the Decade of Perfect Vision, the 2020s, where you go within and listen to that still small voice. And even in this context, you can hear that still small voice like I hear the voice of my sister from time to time. Just let me know, hey, it's okay. And I hear her laugh. I can still hear her laughter. It's a wonderful thing. And also, if you would like to support us financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And we thank you for those who have helped and those who will help. And again, we do appreciate all the support. We'll take energetic support as well. With that, we go to the first of the three questions to our guest here on the program. Again, the author of Building Our Main Street. First question, who is Kristian James?
Kristian James is a fun-loving individual that, like I said, I'm a kid at heart. I've been a fan of the Ninja Turtles since I was 5, Disneyland since I can remember. And my happiness is legitimately going to theme parks and trying to do things to make people happy and make people smile, because like you said, there's a lot of negativity in the world. I don't want to add to it. I want to try to add a little light to somebody that maybe is having a dark time or a dark day.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you're doing now?
To help people. I want to be able to help people and help kids, because like I said, like I think a lot of people went through a very difficult time during COVID. I know I did. During COVID time, people had the massive anxieties, and I want to be able to help people hopefully get back that smile that maybe they lost during that time.
And finally, what is your life's purpose?
Again, I think my life's purpose is being here to help people. Like my military career, I've always I started off as an E1, and even as an E1, they put me in leadership positions to help people because I'm very personable and I'm very empathetic. And now that I'm an officer, I have the opportunity to help my team and lead my team. And, now I can mentor them based on my career that I did and show and hopefully help them not make the same mistakes that I did. And then when it comes to my books, my purpose is hopefully just to make people smile and happy. And I have another book called All Hallows Eve in Salem. It's a kid's book based in Salem, Mass, with like the universal monsters and that kind of thing. And that book really is just to help kids and understand that even if you're different, it's okay. Like, you can be a Frankenstein, you can be a wolf man. And, they go to the town in Salem because they're accepted. Nobody looks at them differently. And they just come as a giant community. And I really wish that's how we would all come together, whether it's, the way you look or your religious background or anything like that. Just, be happy you're here and help those in need, regardless of beliefs or anything like that.
Well, Kristian, once again, thank you so much. And thank you for the insights that you share with both your readers as well as our listeners and viewers. And we hope to have you back again when you have the release of your latest work.
I appreciate it. I'll send it your way when I get it done.
Wonderful, wonderful. And one of these days, maybe we'll have the opportunity to meet in person. And I thank you again for being with us.
Thanks, sir.
And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, as we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal and Jeanette, I am listening.